The next skill is going to be a drag. And there's many variations in how to get this and what to do from it. I'm just going to show a few of the basics, hopefully enough to be able to give you some fundamental skills, and you can adapt them to some other variations. The basic route we're going to work from is from inside control here. Now, you'll get drags from many other situations, but this is just going to be the route where we'll begin this particular discussion and demonstration. Now, with a drag, what I'm trying to do is I'm going to pull his arm past me. To do that, I'm going to use both of my hands. The first hand, the mirrored hand to the arm that I'm going to drag, okay, I've got to slide down towards his wrist. I can't do a drag just by chopping, or beginning the drag by chopping the crook of his arm. I've got to retreat my elbow, and I want to get this part of my wrist and the fleshy part of my hand here against his wrist. You'll notice my thumb and my hand are together. I'm not going to do a drag by grabbing. And the first step is simply to get this down. That's step number one. What I'm going to do is make a tight circle. I retract my hand. I make a tight circle. And I just slap it almost like his hand was hot. And I'm going to try to move it on as quick as possible. Except, I'm going to try to maintain contact as long as I can with it. Okay? So I'm going to make it as quick as possible in terms of the motion. And a small circle, not a big circle. A small circle, not a big circle. I want to make it tight. Pull this in, and I just make a tight circle here. Okay? And I'll kind of use my body, not just my arm, to get to there. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to grab high up on the fleshy part of his arm, high up on his tricep here, okay? Almost up to his shoulder, as opposed to down here, because there's a tendency to slip when you start this, especially if somebody's slippery and wet. So when I start up here, which is the best place, I'm going to end up typically somewhat down here. So start up as high as you can up by the shoulder area, or upper part of the tricep. But I'm going to come here, and as this comes by here, and does that tight circle and throws it by here, I'm going to give this a hook. Now, I'm trying to mostly pull him in, but I'm also going to be coming towards him as well. So, as I do this drag, I'm going to retract my arm. Let's go inside control first. From here, I'm going to come to this position and drag. Now, one thing that's important, just like when I discussed about the knee hitting and then the foot following up very quickly, critical with the drag is that there's very little time between this and that. It can't be a lot of time pass and then grab. It's not exactly simultaneous, but it's almost simultaneous. Okay, there's just a very brief lag. And if you get that concept, typically over time, you'll be very effective with the drag, because the drag is an excellent attack, both for attacking the legs as well as just attacking the body. And we'll be going over more finishes in future DVDs. But this notion to get the drag, I think, is important because it offers a lot of different alternative attacks from it. So, pulling the arm back. I'm going wrist to wrist. I'm not chopping at the elbow. I'm going wrist to wrist. I'm going to go up high after I've spun this by here. Tight circle, boom, to this position. You'll notice I kind of dragged him down and to the side. I don't want to do this. Can you see that that was more laterally? For the basic drag, I don't want to tug his arm laterally. I want to tug his arm down so that there's a lot of weight here initially. Okay? So, when I drag, I want his weight coming down. How can I help myself do that? I can help myself do that if I don't just, when I drag, try to pull with my arms, but I use my body. So as I'm dragging, I'm lowering my level. Okay? That's going to set up, for example, a double attack. We'll go over that more in the future, okay, in the future DVDs. But what I'm trying to get across is I can get my partner's weight, and this is going to be something we'll talk about a lot, down on one side that I'm going to attack. If his weight's down on the side I'm going to attack, it's harder for him to pull it away to retreat and defend against my attack. So, down. You'll notice one method of dragging here is going to be staying on our feet, but I'm still from the root, just from the root that we're practicing. I want you to think about the weight comes down, okay? So even though I'm not sagging, like lowering my level, the weight is coming down and across. I want you to also think about the notion of lowering your level simultaneously so that you can initiate it to attack. Because watch, when I'm here, notice his weight's down, so it's difficult for him to move this foot right away, but also he's concentrating on getting his weight back up, which gives me the opportunity to attack. When you practice this, this is how I would recommend learning this type of technique, just for people that are learning it at first. One, retracting, and just doing this much at first, from here. It's important you feel comfortable with just the first part. Then, what you do is you practice with the second part as well. Then you practice lowering your level. Now, that being said, I want you to think about something else with the drag. I just said a moment ago, I wanted to drag to put his weight here. Sometimes. Okay? There are other times where I want to do it a little differently. And let me show you an example. One of my favorite techniques from a drag, actually, is to go right around to the body. Now, when I drag here, I'm going to cut across here, I tug down, and as I pull, his weight steps forward. It'll step forward because I'm going to pull forward. And what I'm going to do at that point is I'm going to sag like his arm is a rope, and I'm going to swing around behind. You'll notice, if you watch my feet for a moment, his body is carrying my whole weight as I'm swinging around behind. That is an instance where I've dragged him, and I'm keeping his weight on the leg closest to me. Again, he's pushing into me, for example. Typically, we're going to go down to the mat in that situation. Watch my feet as I do that. From here, he pushes in. My feet are off the mat as I'm swinging. His whole body, he's supporting, his body is supporting his weight as well as mine as I swing around. There's tremendous weight, basically double his weight if I weigh about what he does, on this leg, or mostly on this leg, which gives me the opportunity to swing around behind. Alternatively, there are times with the drag, and again we'll get into more details on this. I'm just again trying to fill your mind up with some concepts and notions about what you're trying to do and why, where what you want to do is not attack and pull his weight this way, but I might try to attack and go into him and pull his weight on that far foot. So for example, there are times in the drag where I'm going to emphasize pulling him more into me, and there are times in the drag where I'm going to be emphasizing going more into him. Again, depending upon the particular attack you're trying to initiate. And if you think about principles of movement as we gradually go over more and more of these, this will make sense to you, and hopefully I'm going to instill a way of thinking about technique so that you can understand, oh, when I'm trying to do this technique and it's not working, why might it not be working? And you can hopefully have some foundation and some concepts down to evaluate your own technique, and then hopefully be able to figure out, oh, maybe I may need to do it a slightly different way because my weight is going the wrong way, or I'm putting my opponent's weight in a way that's unfavorable for me to attack them. Sometimes the goal is to pull him towards me and his weight on the foot closest to me. Other times, I may try to pull the arm more through, jam into him, and put his weight on the far leg to attack. So there can be differences depending upon the type of attack you want to initiate. And that's very, very important, because if I'm trying to attack into him and I'm pulling his weight here, it may be very difficult because he has a post coming against me in this direction. For me to drive in, he's still got good push power here, whereas it's more logical for me to take him that way. Okay? Again, trying to get some principles of motion and movement down here. After you've practiced the drag some, for example, one-handed drag just to get the first part of it, using two, lowering your level, then a good practice or a good drill is when I pull here, notice the angle of his shoulders. This shoulder comes forward because as I tend to drag him, I'm kind of pulling his shoulder towards me as I'm also trying to cut the distance perhaps. So his shoulder turns back. A lot of times when my partner defends against that, he does the opposite. And that sets the opposite side up. And so a good practice drill is to go one side then the other as your partner or your opponent kind of pulls back and forth. This cobra's going to line up with me here. I'm going to drag and he blocks. Drag, 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 drag. That develops some sensitivity, both in terms of developing the drag motion, but also, too, that's a very effective setup for a drag. That is, attacking one side. When your partner or opponent defends against that, you drag the opposite because, as I mentioned before, if I drag this side and he defends, this shoulder is already coming forward, this arm is coming this way, I continue the motion.